I like to think that there's a big four of chord progressions, these four behemoths that seem to have stood the test of time and appear in seemingly every genre. Since I've already done a video on these guys, I figure it's about time I finally tackle the legendary Royal Road chord progression. Its simplicity and power have made this chord progression so ubiquitous and enduring, appearing in so many genres of popular music in many parts of the world, especially in Japan, from which the name Royal Road originates.
Super Idol 的笑容都没你的甜，8月正午的阳光都没你耀眼。
What I love about this progression, though, is that there's a lot more depth than you would expect out of a short 4-chord sequence, since we can often reharmonize or alter the progression without losing its recognizability. So let's look at every possible variation of the Royal Road I could find. You guys don't understand, it's in so many songs that I felt obligated to choose at least a few of the mainstream bangers. I know I do otherwise have a habit of fixating on the most random examples.
5 minutes later.
Alright guys, now that we're at the end of the video, it's time to look at my favorite video game soundtrack of all time, the 2015 solo developer indie masterpiece, Flappy Golf for iPhone. Before we talk about the Royal Road chord progression, first a word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Storyblocks. Sometimes I need to record B-reel for a segment or take some pictures to try and cobble together something cool for a thumbnail, and it often looks, well, like this. Finding good stock assets online usually isn't reliable either, with many libraries being inundated with AI-generated slop. But with Storyblocks, you can find premium assets without worrying about either of those problems. Storyblocks' extensive library features quality stock images, video, audio, and more. And most importantly, all of these assets are 100% human-made, created by artists and filmmakers around the world. Hooray! All of the assets you download are royalty-free, pre-licensed, and ready for use in any project, personal or professional. To start telling better stories with the tools I use, head to storyblocks.com/cadencehira. They're also offering a limited time discount for my audience, only available through my link, which is in the description. Alright, so what is the Royal Road chord progression? The standard Royal Road is considered to be 4 chords long, the 4, 5, 3, and 6, often with their appropriate sevenths. Often the sequence appears as a straightforward chord progression looping indefinitely. We can hear a super clear example of this in Sky Road from Team Sonic Racing. Feels super good, remains entirely in our key, but still has a lot of momentum. And I think this momentum is owed to the interesting structure of the Royal Road. We start with a very standard 4-5, which of course wants to collapse into our 1. But instead we get the subdominant 3 minor, which kind of acts as a weak stand-in for the 1. And then we get the 6, which is our minor tonic, but still doesn't quite give us the catharsis of resolution we would get with the 1. This then loops, interestingly omitting our major tonic entirely. To me, this makes the chord progression always feel like it's tumbling, this simple kind of Jacob's ladder figure that never quite resolves. Interestingly, this is often remedied by alternating the Royal Road with a simple resolution to 1 afterwards, kind of turning the Royal Road from a 4-bar loop into an 8-bar loop, except the latter 4 bars break the tension. We can hear this in the capture theme from the underrated Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia. We can see how in phrase 2, rather than going to 3, we get a solid 4-5-1 for a proper resolution. We also see a rather common convention in tunes with Royal Road, a bit of melodic sequence. In sequence, we take our melody and simply continue to move it upwards or downwards in a pattern. We can see that the melody here just transposes downwards by 1 step, matching the G chord also moving 1 step down to F sharp minor. We'll see this happen in many of the tunes later, but let's take a look at another variation of this kind of Royal Road that resolves to 1. Piranha Plant Lullaby does pretty much the exact same thing as the earlier example, except it replaces our 4 at the start of the second phrase with a similarly functioning 2 minor. This gives us a really nice bass movement, where we resolve by 5th from the 3 chord all the way down to the 1. It's cool to see that Royal Road is often an important component of larger chord progressions. This chord progression approximates a variation of circle progression, one of the aforementioned big 4 at the beginning of the video. The Royal Road fits nicely in here, because after the 3 minor, 6 minor, we get to continue downwards to the 2, then the 5, then our major tonic 1. But we don't have to only resolve to our major tonic, we can also set up a more solid resolution to the minor tonic after the first 4 chords of Royal Road. In the Devil Connection theme, we have the usual Royal Road, but then set up a 2-5 of our 6, serving to more soundly resolve, but instead tonicizing our 6 minor, the minor tonic, rather than the 1, giving a kind of darker flavor. We can also see that with this walk down here, this part of the progression resembles the Just the Two of Us chord progression, another one of the big 4 that Royal Road can insert itself into. Royal Road's versatility cannot be understated. Not only can it retain its identity within a larger chord progression, but it's even recognizable and keeps its function if we substitute some of the chords. So let's go through each of the 4 chords in the progression and see different ways we can reharm them. The first chord substitutions are probably the simplest, as we can do what we just saw in the prior examples, substitute the 4 for the 2 minor. A few cool things are happening here. We have the melodic sequence, but as a consequence of the first chord being the 2, the sequence moves in the opposite direction of the bass. The melody moves down by step, while the 2 goes up by step to the 3. Another cool thing is that with the first chord being the 2, the chord progression has a nicer symmetry. The chords move down by 5th in the first half, and then move down by 5th again in the second half. It also kind of tessellates with itself. The 6 at the end moves nicely by 5th back to the 2 at the start of the progression. It's funny that this is a mathematically kinder variation of the Royal Road in a sense, but also the less common version. I suppose the 4 just feels marginally better or more intuitive to start on, which is totally fine. Funny enough, this is the only Royal Road variation I could find that only changes the first chord. I suppose the 2 or the 4 is just too important in establishing the progression. If you guys have any examples that are believably Royal Road but use a chord in the beginning that isn't 2 or 4, let me know in the comments. The second chord, our 5, is a lot more malleable. We just have to put something here that maintains the tension-y, dominant flavor and function. By far the most common variation of this chord is simple inversion. We take this chord and flip it over one of its chord tones, which is usually the 7th. We can hear this in the pre-chorus of Smash Ultimate's main theme.
These little sparks cling on to life. Everyone caught in this struggle.
And also Ecruteak City from Pokemon. I really like how elegant this inversion is. It accomplishes a few things at once. First, it creates a cool pedal point effect in the bass. In this inversion, the bass stays the same between both the 4 and 5, which feels a bit smoother. But this also bridges nicely to the next chord, as now, rather than jumping down by 3rd as we usually do, we just step down. Additionally, the inverted 5 is a bit more ambiguous than the root position version, which works well to maintain its power, but also obfuscates its functionality as wanting to resolve to 1, which doesn't happen, of course. We can take this idea of maintaining the bass movement of our 4 and take it one step further, just using the 4 again, but making it minor this time. We can hear this in another Pokemon tune, the classic National Park. It just absolutely rips your heart out of your chest. The classic 4 major into 4 minor is so melancholy, and our first real example of a variation that dips into non-diatonic land, taking this chord from parallel minor. This of course darkens our chord progression. Because of its sheer gravity, the 4 minor works wonderfully as a substitute for the 5. Going in a different direction, we can also substitute the 5 for another dominant. We can see this in our third and final consecutive Pokemon tune, Evergrande City. And also in the massively underrated credits theme from Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color. The tune starts as an arrangement of the Invincibility theme, then going into the 2/5 variation of Royal Road. But in one of the later sections, we get this. It's our standard 4, then the non-diatonic flat 7 dominant 7 as a substitute for our 5. Jazz heads might call this our backdoor dominant, a pretty standard substitute for the 5, which typically wants to resolve up by whole step. If you're an axis believer, you can also see this as an axis substitution. We're borrowing the 5 of flat vertex E flat major. This chord also establishes our nice symmetry we saw earlier. We go down a fifth from the 4 to get to the flat 7, and then go down a fifth from the 3 to the 6 as usual. A rather uncommon reharm that gives a kind of inquisitive quality to the standard Royal Road. The variations of the third chord, our 3, are rather interesting. The most intuitive is simply making the 3 dominant, turning it into the secondary dominant 5 of 6 that pulls into our subsequent 6 chord. We can hear this in Kirby in the Amazing Mirror's Rainbow Route. As well as High Above the Land from A Shovel Knight. I absolutely adore this theme, and that 5 of 6 just feels so climactic. This chord also accomplishes a few things. First, as previously mentioned, it serves as the secondary dominant of 6, giving us a powerful resolution. It also kind of extends the dominant power from the previous 5, giving this nice kind of accelerating energy into our 6. And finally, in this inversion, we get this lovely figure that steps up in the bass, from the 4 all the way to the 6. It just feels so good, which is probably also due to the Royal Road's placement in this larger progression, which is pretty much the canon chord progression, the last of our big 4 we haven't seen yet. Really cool to see yet another example of Royal Road functioning as this critical infrastructure of a longer, perhaps equally iconic chord progression. But back to talking about the 3 chord, what if we don't change the quality at all? There's a few examples where we have our standard 3 minor 7 chord, but add the bright tension 9 over top. Listen to this snippet of Tomodachi Life's Mii Maker theme. But one of my favorite examples is in today's obligatory non-video game tune, Sign 0 by Chocho. All of the magic comes from this C in the piano here. Diatonically, we would expect C flat, giving us the flat 9 over the 3 chord. But despite it being diatonic, the flat 9 is usually omitted from our 3 minor 7 as it sounds kinda gross. But changing this note to the natural 9, C in this case, gives us this lovely chord that is incidentally so bright, as the 3 minor 9 gives kind of a Lydian flavor. It's one of my favorite examples of interchange, or otherwise a chord substitution where we're not really even changing the chord, just subtly altering one of the tensions. But it still has so much power, and one of the few examples of an alteration of Royal Road that actually comes from a brighter place, making the chord progression overall brighter as a result. Which brings us to the variations of the final chord in the progression, the 6. Probably the most dynamic chord in the progression, all the reharms take advantage of the 6's place at the end of the progression, using it to create more tension for the loop, rather than reinforcing the 6's tonic quality. By far, the most common alteration to the 4th chord, and perhaps even the entire chord progression overall, is changing the 6 minor 7 into a 6 dominant 7, or 5 of 2. We can hear this in Drill Dozer's 3rd gear theme. And also, one of my personal favorites, the absolutely luscious and sweeping bridge from Smash Melee's opening. That 5 of 6 just gives such a schmaltzy pull and serves to give a bit more momentum to the end of the phrase, helping to loop back to Royal Road, or go to the 2 for a 2-5-1 kind of thing, as we see here. There's a really elegant symmetry if we change the first chord to 2, which we can hear in the Windmill Isle theme from Sonic Unleashed. Now, not only does the 5 of 2 loop back nicely to the 2, but the structure of our chord progression is just two 2-5s back to back, the diatonic 2-5 and then the 2-5 of 2. Most other substitutions from our 6 also serve as some bridge to bring us from the 3 to the 2. Sometimes we get the interesting flat 3 major, a borrowed slightly darker chord. We can hear this in Mario Odyssey's Fossil Falls theme. And also in Undertale's Reunited. Super straightforward and almost deceptively simple, the 3 walks down a half step to the flat 3 major, and then walks down another half step to the 2 in the following phrase. I've always found this chord super interesting. The bass movement makes a lot of sense, of course, but the flat 3 as a chord almost feels too resolved in a sense, lacking the momentum we saw in the 5 of 6 earlier. It is a cool chord though, and the bass movement does help it to still have a bit of pull. We do have some examples that take the flat 3 and change the quality to maintain that strictly dominant flavor for the tension. Super Mario Kart's Rainbow Road theme has a cool example of this. Whereas in the previous 2 examples, the flat 2 functioned as a cool modal interchange chord, this time we have the dominant 7, making it function as a tritone substitution, the jazzy sub 5 of 2, the dark and twisted counterpart of the 5 of 2 we saw earlier. This gives us the best of both worlds. We get the dominant function of the 5 of 2, while also getting that smooth stepping bass movement of the flat 3. That bass movement also allows this really cool contrary motion we see between the bass and melody. The bass hangs on F and then steps down, while the melody pretty much only rises. Super cool. But I have saved my 4 favorite Royal Road video game tunes for last, most of them containing some interesting exceptions to the typical alterations we've seen. In my opinion, each of these tunes effectively leverages the Royal Road's potential for sheer melancholy and that smooth, buttery movement. First, we have the tune that inspired this video in the first place, Anarchy Poison's Boar Mix from Splatoon 3. What I love about this tune is how the chorus is just 2 Royal Roads slapped together, but reharmed just enough that each phrase feels distinct. Phrase 2 is the same variation as the one we saw in Sonic Unleashed, the one with two 2/5s. But phrase 1 gives us two new chords, each of them diminished. We have the usual 4, which goes into the 4 diminished with the major 7, replacing the 5. It's so powerful and has this almost tragic quality. This resolves downwards to our usual 3, which goes down again into another diminished, the flat 3, which then resolves down one last time into the 2 at the start of the next phrase. It gives us another kind of progression where the bass walks down, but it's so much heavier this time due to the diminished chords. And these chords are so bossa, which makes a lot of sense given the in-universe composer is directly inspired by Brazilian culture, which is pretty cool. Exactly the kind of cool harmonic movement I would expect from my music theory loving Splatoon Oshi big man. Big man? Rivali's theme is another example of a cool variation of the Royal Road. Everything about this just rips my heart out and tears it into a billion pieces. We have the 4 diminished 7 again, which I'm starting to realize is a trend in the Royal Road tunes I really enjoy. I also adore this melodic sequence. This snippet of melody transposes verbatim, and we also see the subversive flat 6 in place of the expected 2 or 4. Unrelated to Royal Road, but we also have a low-key implied sharp 15 tension over this major chord, which is kinda crazy. Pivoting away from Nintendo, we get the legendary Baka Mitai from the Yakuza series.
ダメだねダメよダメなのよあんたが好きで好きすぎてどれだけ強いお酒でも歪まない思い出が
We get a pretty standard Royal Road, and then this cool 5 of 6 with a sharp 11. But what I really want to focus on is this, the phrase right here that starts on the sharp 4 minor 7 flat 5. A rare example of replacing the 4 at the start of the Royal Road. The sharp 4 minor 7 flat 5 gives a bit of an unresolved, inquisitive feeling. It actually displaces the 4 to the following measure, which replaces our standard 5. Kind of pushes the boundaries of what you would consider Royal Road, but I think this is still recognizable, especially with the intact 3-6 in the tail end. The sharp 4 minor 7 flat 5, of course, starts us at a higher elevation, so to speak, letting our bass roll down this chromatic hill to the 4, then the 3, before falling into the 6. That falling feeling and the slight darkness of the sharp 4 work wonderfully to sell the themes of lamentation and longing at the tail end of this chorus. Which leaves us with our final tune and the other song that inspired this video, Mellow Fellowship from Phoenotopia Awakening. The tune starts with a pretty standard Royal Road. But in the B section, we get some more interesting stuff. get that 4/4 diminished once more, and with that slow pulsing synth that just hits so hard. We hear that usual 2/5/1 in the following phrase, but also get this nice 5/4 to bring us back to the start of the Royal Road, which we haven't really seen yet. The second half of the B section is so fun. Despite starting the same with the 4/4 diminished, we subvert the expected 3 by hitting the 6/1 measure early, which then goes to this 2 dominant 7. Arguably not even really Royal Road at this point, but still really cool, and I love the way it climbs brighter. The 4 diminished is so oppressively dark, then the 6 minor 7 alleviates that a bit, and the 2/7 brings us up further to this homier kind of space. The 2/7 is a rare kind of chord that wants to resolve to another version of itself, rather than going up or down. In this case, it wants to resolve the 2 minor 7 at the start of the following phrase, which it doesn't actually do. Instead, it goes to the 4, which as we've seen is rather interchangeable with the 2. But the 4 is here for good reason, as we have this lovely diatonic walk down to the 3, then to the 2, and then 5 to loop back to the beginning. What I love about this chorus is that all 4 phrases are distinct and take advantage of almost everything we've seen with the Royal Road, reharming each chord in different ways, interspersing resolutions to the 1, and pushing ever forward with its trademark momentum. It so brilliantly scores this scene of your rural village, simultaneously sad as an unexplainable tragedy befell the village folk, but also optimistic as the eve before your grand quest to save them. It's so intimate and has so much heart, and for that reason is my favorite example of Royal Road in video games. But what do you guys think? This is of course by no means a comprehensive list of every way you can reharm Royal Road, so if you guys have any wacky examples or otherwise want to talk about your favorite Royal Road bangers I may have missed, post them in the comments. I do also want to give a quick shout out to my favorite Royal Road videos from other good in music theory YouTubers, so check those guys out if you want to see some cool non-video game examples. If you like this video, absolutely demolish that subscribe button, ring that bell as hard as you can, and head to my Patreon immediately if you want to see some behind the scenes, music theory memes, and Patreon exclusive streams. I did unfortunately run out of time to talk about the Flappy Golf OST, so I'll end the video with another 20 minutes of no commentary gameplay.
I hate this channel.